Welcome to Behind Designs. When creating a movie, TV show or theatre production, one of the most important things you need is a set. A set builds the world around the actors and gives them something to interact with. It defines the mood of a scene, it immerses the audience within the story and helps tell it. It can even be the lead character. They can be absolutely huge. The largest set ever made was Hobbiton for The Lord of the Rings. At 610,000 square feet, or 57,000 square meters, it equates to the size of 8 football pitches. They can also be absolutely tiny, like in the film Buried, where the whole movie was set inside a 7-foot box. They can cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and another 100 million when things go wrong. So what is the role of a set designer, and what do they actually do in order to bring the script to reality? A set designer's role is to bring what's in the director's head to life, and is essentially the director's brush, taking a vision and bringing it into the real world, whether that be physically or digitally. Set design is split into 2 categories, recreation and conceptualization, and there is an absolute mastery in both. Firstly, let's look at recreation. Recreation is where the script calls for a scene or sequence to be shot in a real-world location, past or present, and the designer is confined by these constraints. The design needs to fit with the materials and finishes available in that time or location. However, because of what needs to be filmed there, or the length of time they need to shoot for, or the fact that what the scene calls for simply isn't there anymore, an easy location scouting job is out of the question. So the production team need to recreate a real-world location. There are plenty of amazing examples of this: Titanic, The Matrix, Apollo 13, Ben-Hur, Saving Private Ryan, Cleopatra. The list is endless. With recreation, a set designer's attention to detail is paramount. If for 1 second the viewer is distracted by something that shouldn't be there, or looks out of place, the illusion is ruined and they are quickly pulled from the world the production has worked so hard to build back to reality. A great example that perfectly demonstrates a set designer's role is with The Matrix Reloaded's epic highway scene. For this scene, the production required a stretch of highway to film a very elaborate car chase on. There are plenty of quiet stretches of highway all around the world that they could have gone to film on. However, the scene calls for it to be set in heavy downtown traffic, in order to bring home the peril of what the characters are about to experience.
You always told me to stay off the freeway.
Yes, that's true.
You said it was suicide.
Then let us hope that I was wrong.
Therefore, they had no choice but to build from scratch a perfect replica of 1.5 miles of North American highway, costing in excess of $2.5 million. The first step of the designer's job would be to sit down with the wider production crew and map out exactly what the technical requirements for the scene are. Using the storyboard, they can work out how long it needs to be, how tall, how wide, and what elements it requires. On-off ramps, bridges, lights, signs. They even need to decide what orientation to have the highway so that the shadows of the walls don't cause dark patches, where the difference in light levels would cause problems for the cameras. Once this has all been agreed and a rough layout for the build is confirmed, the designer can then move into the dressing and material finishes stage, where every detail has to be considered to be consistent with where the scene is set. With the lanes, length and distance between road markings, drains, signs, fonts, cement grade, medium blocks, every possible detail that you can get right adds to the authenticity of the scene and gives you the perfected set that is the foundation of any production. As without this strong foundation, everything that's built on it will fall down. The second type of set is conceptualization. This is where the set is designed without the constraints of the real world. Star Wars, Star Trek, Wizard of Oz, Avatar, Alien, Metropolis. All these movies are set in conceptual worlds, and the set needs to be equally conceptual. The set designers work exceptionally hard so that the sets deliberately don't have any real-world elements that look familiar to us. All surfaces are treated and considered. Even simple objects are designed so that you don't recognize them. There's no point transporting you to a galaxy far, far away just to see the IKEA chair you have in your living room on a spaceship. Everything has to fit with the production's concept. This allows a set designer to have a lot more artistic freedom. And working closely with the production designer and conceptual artist, they can truly express themselves and come up with some amazing masterpieces. Having worked in both realms, for me, one isn't easier, less artistic, or rewarding than the other. All design, when boiled down, is about problem solving, and working in set design, it's one problem to overcome after another. My favourite type of production is where the two worlds meet. and I think that Christopher Nolan's Interstellar is the shining example of how these two worlds can fold into each other perfectly. With the film being set on Earth and in space, it required both recreation and conceptualization. For the recreation portion of set design, they needed houses, farms, and fallout bunkers. Conceptually, they needed ships, black holes, and parallel universes. It being a Christopher Nolan film, attention to detail and realism was paramount. A great example of his attention to detail and want for perfection is the Cooper Farm set. The scene called for a farmhouse set in a cornfield with mountains in the distance. Rather than doing a simple location scouting job, finding a farm to film on and digitally adding in the mountains after, they started by finding the right background and building the set from there. Just outside of Calgary in Canada, they found a plot of land that had the required mountains in the distance and went about building the whole farmhouse from scratch, finishing it and furnishing it to a standard where you would have sworn it had been there for 50 years. From peeling discoloured wallpaper to distressed wood, every detail was considered. To go with the farmhouse, they also needed 500 acres of cornfields, so they painstakingly planted them all, surrounding the house by hand, so that the corn could sit in perfectly straight lines, mirroring the mathematical theme of the film. The crop was so good that after filming wrapped, they sold the corn and actually made a profit on the cost of planting it all. Very impressive. But then again, one time he did blow up a hospital. Nolan always strives to create everything the viewer sees practically. All of the effects that can be done in camera are done in camera, and having the budgetary freedom to create these vast sets allows him to do that. Using practical effects and physical sets are always the preferred option, as the actors can react to what's going on in front of them live, allowing them to give a better, more believable performance. On this film, Nolan and his team pushed the limits of what's possible everywhere, inventing new methods and techniques that are now in common usage. So what about when things aren't done in camera and you need to use a green or blue screen? How does a set designer's workflow change? Honestly, it's not very dissimilar. Even when building a physical set these days, it will still be completely built using 3D computer software first, so that the designs can be checked by the camera teams, lighting designers, stunt coordinators, and all the other departments working on the production. The main cast will more than likely also feed into the designs these days too, but instead of these designs being drawn up into plans and hitting the shop floor, they will get inserted behind the actors and become part of the movie. So are digital sets the future of set design? The shift in the last 20 years from physical to green screen dependence would suggest so. Just look at the difference between the Lord of the Rings trilogy to the Hobbit trilogy. However, relying too heavily on green screen creates a fake, rubbery feel to the production that the Hobbit greatly suffered from. This is also, in my opinion, the reason why the DC films fall so far behind the Marvel franchise. The DC films have a massive over-reliance on CGI, making the actors' jobs much harder to give a good performance.
Now when Zod came down, that was Michael Shannon's first day on set. He and I had talked and he had asked me whether or not he was gonna have armor on in the movie, and I said, of course you're gonna have real armor in the movie. How else would we do it? And he was like, oh great, because I don't wanna look like an idiot in the pajamas. And of course, he shows up in his pajama suit and I'm like, yeah, sorry, it's gonna be CG army. So he was not happy. And then he goes, where's the spaceship? I'm like, well, those green stairs are the spaceship. But amazing performance regardless.
And the amount of computer graphics gives the films a rubbery, cartoonish look that sits uneasy with the human eye. Whereas the Marvel franchise goes for a hybrid approach, with most things in the immediate vicinity of the actors real and the rest CG. This is a trend that most productions have moved towards. The more practical elements, the better. I don't want to blame Hollywood's move away from practical sets in the early 2000s all on the prequel Star Wars films, but recently set design has taken an exciting leap forward, using a technique originally created for sci-fi films that helped the production crew get around the problem of matching the reflection and lighting in transparent objects to the green screen backgrounds. They did this by using LED screens playing the content that would later be in the background. They were able to mimic the reflections and lighting of the scene in the reflective and glass materials. Scaling the same technique up due to a technological leap in LED screen technology and the screen manufacturer's ability to make giant, seamless, high-resolution LED walls, productions are able to remove green screen completely and put a digital background into the scene rather than having to add it in later, bringing the best of both worlds together. You have the speed, cost savings, and infinite creative possibilities of a digital backdrop, but you also have something physical for the actors to work with and react to. It also allows a dream scenario where the set designer can work live on the design, moving objects around instantly and changing material finishes, or even adding in entire new pieces on the fly. This is a really exciting time for set design and an amazing leap into the future. But what about when you don't have a fancy LED screen or $500 million budget that allows you to build whatever you want? This is where the ingenuity and creativity of a set designer comes into play. The film Dogville by Lars von Trier is a great example of absolute minimalist yet creatively brave set design. Instead of building a huge set and numerous houses, they used one soundstage with simple lines on the floor to denote house layouts of a single street. For those who haven't seen the film, it is about a mysterious woman named Grace, played by Nicole Kidman, who is in hiding from the criminals that pursue her. The town is two-faced and offers to harbour Grace as long as she can make it worth their effort, so Grace works hard under the employment of various townspeople to win their favour. And the set plays perfectly into this, allowing us to see through the walls at what everyone is saying behind her back, giving the viewer the whole picture whilst our protagonist Grace is none the wiser, constantly building the tension. Creating minimalist or digital sets also helps one overlook aspects of set design and movie production, and that is the environmental impact of set design. Building a physical set is a very wasteful process. Tons of materials are needed, and then they are only used for a short period of time, sometimes just minutes for one short scene. What happens to all these huge sets when the production wraps? It all unfortunately goes straight in the bin. And because of fire regulations, fireproof coatings are used in the materials to bring them up to the Class 1 fire ratings required, so they couldn't be recycled even if there was the inclination to do so. There is also the environmental impact to consider of flying out entire production crews and transporting materials around the world on planes and in trucks to filming locations. The amount of waste in the industry is truly staggering and something that I think needs to be brought to light. I've seen signs up from the movie studio proudly banning all single-use water bottles and all other plastics from set, whilst at the same time forming hundreds of giant plastic props that will be sat in landfill in less than a week. In today's current climate, it is something that needs to be addressed, and many set construction companies now offer recycling services, albeit at an extra fee, but it's a move in the right direction. Or maybe the answer is just to recycle sets, over and over and over and over and over again. Good old Quality Cafe, the most famous cafe you've never heard of. Set design really is an amazing world of creativity and ingenuity. If there are any young designers out there, I would suggest getting into set design as your first stepping stone into the design world, as the learning curve is so steep and the breadth of transferable knowledge you get is so vast. One day you're designing furniture, the next it's a spaceship. And who knows, even a quick last second decision before the camera starts rolling on the first day of shooting might become something iconic. Thanks for watching this episode of Behind Designs.